Hello, and welcome to another edition of Mastering Dungeons. Teos is off on a wild adventure in Europe. So I have recruited the one and the only Mike Sly Flourish Shea. Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well. I'm so excited to be here. I am sad Teos isn't here, but of course, if Teos was here, I wouldn't be. So I guess I'm sad and happy.
Yeah,
but thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. We always love talking with you. So let's do this. Let's jump right into it because you have some news of your own. And what I thought we would do is, rather than have a main topic, we're going to cover the news, but we're going to go in depth because a lot of the news this week really invites some deeper analysis of some things that we were going to talk about anyway. So as we cover the news, we're going to do some deep dives into some D&D business topics, some D&D design topics, and sort of meld the two together. Does that sound good?
That sounds awesome.
All right. So to start right off, let's talk about your Kickstarter, the
Sure.
Lazy DM's Companion. It's only been up for a few days now, and it's doing very well. I just backed it. So I want to hear what I'm getting, Mike. I want to hear where my gaming dollars are going.
Excellent. I'm eager to give you high value for your gaming dollar. This is the third of the Lazy DM book series. It's actually technically the fourth, but we're going to say it's the third, which really includes Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, the Lazy DM's Workbook, and now the Lazy DM's Companion. And all of these books work together to help DMs run better 5e games or better RPGs overall. And we could talk more about like how 5e are they and how much do they serve other RPGs. And the answer is they serve other RPGs very well. I kind of intend for them to serve other fantasy RPGs very well. So where Return was a book that offered some philosophy and advice for a structure for preparing your game, and then offering thoughts on preparing your game, running your game, and thinking about your game. The workbook really sat there at your table when you're running a game to kind of help you improvise during the game, give you charts and tables and tools to help you improvise as the game goes in all of the weird directions that our games tend to go in. The companion is really there to sit with you when you're actually thinking about your game, building your campaigns, building your adventures, and trying to shake yourself out of the groove when you're thinking about where your game is going to go. So it really breaks this down into two different kinds of things. Guidelines, which help streamline running 5e, things that make it easier to run 5e, things that can take a lot of the workload off of you when you're running your 5e games, and also let you expand the kinds of stories that you can share with your friends when you're running your games. And adventure generators, so adventure and campaign generators, which are sets of random tables intended to help you build out all sorts of different components of your campaign. Everything from a specific adventure you're running right now to larger campaigns to things like weird cults and weird gods, all kinds of generators for stuff like that, all with the intent of sort of grabbing you and shaking you and getting you to think differently about the game that you've got. So the companion is going to be a 64-page softcover book, PDF and softcover book, and will sit very well with the other two.
Awesome. So to sort of get to a question that you prompted, what's 5e and what's not? How deep into 5e mechanics do you get with some of the content?
So I would say pretty light. I think all of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is agnostic generally for fantasy RPGs. So it can work with all RPGs. I know people that have used it for Star Wars. I know people that have used it for all kinds of different games and different genres. But I still had fantasy RPGs in mind when I wrote that one. The workbook is probably the most 5e specific, and it's about 25% 5e, 25% 5e stuff, and then the other 75% are like adventure locations and random tables that you can use to generate things for any kind of game. And then the Lazy DM's Companion is probably about 15% focused on 5e, and mostly in those guidelines, like another take on how to set up encounter, how to do encounter balance, or how to run hordes. There's a few that are specific for There's a few that are specific for 5e, but the majority of that book could be used with any fantasy game. And one thing that I try to think about to try to help keep these books sort of robust over the long time is say, if I handed this back to myself in the 90s, how happy would I be with this book? And if the answer is pretty happy, then I think that it's a pretty robust book and should hopefully continue to survive into the future as we look at new versions of the game and new takes on the game and stuff like that. So I think I think about it a lot, and I've worked pretty hard on the books to make sure that it would be useful for lots of different RPGs and useful for lots of different versions of D&D.
Nice. So would you say this is a little bit more for more experienced DMs, or still good for beginning DMs?
So so I found this out when I wrote the original Lazy Dungeon Masters. I intended it for more experienced DMs, and then I had many, many new DMs come to me and say, it worked just as well for me being inexperienced. And I was like, oh, okay, great. Like, nice. That was unexpected. So then I paid more attention to that when I wrote Return, and I've gotten lots of new people who have read Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and it's gotten them off on the right foot early on in their DMing. And I think there's probably some advanced topics, but the fact that it's a lazy guide, right? The fact that this is really intended to make it as easy as possible to run games means that it makes it easier for people who are just starting out to run games. So there's not like incredibly detailed subsystems. There's not super in-depth stuff. It's hard to say, having played D&D so long, to be 100% sure of this, but I know that when I was looking at it, I don't think that there's anything so advanced that somebody who's new to it would have trouble. Obviously, it expects that you know the basic rules of the game, that you already know how to run a role-playing game. Maybe you've run a handful of games, 2 or 3 games. But I think once you've got the basics of the game and the understanding of the game, and your next question is, okay, well, how am I supposed to prepare? Or what can I get to help me to prepare? Then you can start to do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. So when this show drops, there'll be about 2 weeks left in the Kickstarter. You're already at 6,500 backers. How does this compare to your expectations, and how does it compare to your previous exploits?
So it's closing in very quickly and having more backers than the original Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master had. Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master was blew my expectations out of the water. Right, I thought it was going to be a small black and white book. And when I put it out, and I got 6,700 backers for that, and that was really far more than I thought and I expected, which tells me that lots of people want this. Lots of people want this kind of help, and so we're just about to cross over that. I think about halfway through the campaign, I think we're gonna hit that. Nice. It has definitely blown away my expectations. I had no idea that it was going to be. I mean, when I had 6,500 on a previous one, I said, okay, well, maybe 5,000 is possible, right? Like, I don't know if I'll get everybody that I got with the old one, so we'll see. But the main thing that I've been focusing on is just like, trying to make the book great. So I'm really happy the Kickstarter is doing as well as it's doing. That makes me really excited. And now all of my thoughts and energy is about, great, now I want to make sure to put a good book into people's hands. Right? Yeah. That's what's most important.
Awesome. Before we move on, is there anything else that you want to mention about the Kickstarter?
I don't think so. I'm really excited for it, and I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the support. I've got a couple of Q&A videos on YouTube that I did to kind of answer a lot of questions about how this Kickstarter works. I guess there's one other aspect to it, which I didn't mention, which is that this is the first time that we are doing a full print run of all 3 books. So it's the first time that you can get a hardcover version of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master that's gone through offset printing. We're doing a spiral-bound version of the Lazy DM's workbok so that it actually sits flat on your table when you're running your game. Real easy to use. I've actually recommended people take the glue-bound one, take it to like a Kinko's and spiral-bound it there. And I have a couple that I've done that way, and it's so much more usable that way. I've been working with a printer to say this is the way the book ought to be, and then that softcover book. So yeah, the top end. The top end pledge on the Kickstarter is to get all 3 books in print shipped to your door with PDFs and everything else of all the material underneath.
Excellent. So I wanted to move on to another Kickstarter that's in the news right now to sort of both compare, how the Kickstarter yours is and theirs is going, as well as get into some more topics. And that Kickstarter is EnWorld's LevelUp Advanced 5e Kickstarter. So with that, you are getting a whole new version of 5e. Basically, they are calling it the advanced 5e game. So with that Kickstarter, you get a core set, which includes 3 books, as you might expect: the Adventurer's Guide, i.e. the Player's Handbook, Trials and Treasure, i.e. the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then the Monstrous Menagerie, i.e. the Monster Manual. Right. And they also have 2 more books that you can get as extensions, a world book setting, and then a book of legendary heroes and villains called Mythological Figures and Maleficent Monsters. So it is quite an ambitious project, let's say. Lots of people working on it, lots of new stuff. And when this Kickstarter first started, it's only a few days old at this point. I thought, oh boy, this is going to go gangbusters. And it's got 2,500 backers, and it's at around $400,000 with 25 days to go, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
But I'm actually surprised it's not doing better. So the content of the Kickstarter aside, which we won't know about until we actually see the books, I want to get into a topic of, what do D&D fans want? Do they want an advanced 5e? Because this is going to go into a direct discussion on 5.5 or a new version of D&D that they discussed. Right. And we're all speculating what's it going to be. So I am out there looking for signs of what do people want? What's going to sell well?
Yeah.
And for me, with only 25, to say only 2,500 backers seems ridiculous, because 3 years ago, we would have said, oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, is it that awesome? And why isn't it better? Because EnWorld is huge in the D&D world.
Right.
There's lots and lots and lots of, subscribers to EnWorld, and, Morris does a great job of running his media empire, if you will.
Right.
So I'm wondering if people are waiting. I'm wondering if they just don't want to spend so much right now. What's your take on this?
I mean, price is definitely a factor, right? I think it's not a cheap pledge to just get the digital versions of the book. Right. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I backed it because I'm very interested in it. And I remember going like, that's kind of a lot, right, for a big pile of PDFs. And of course, it's not a lot when you think it's 3 big core books, right? And they've already shown the design and everything like that. So I don't know. To answer your question of like, what do D&D players want? I don't know, right? I don't know that anybody knows, right? We're all trying lots of things. And so it's tough to tell. I'm actually really excited for LevelUp 5e. I think they've done some things with the design that I'm really I think is really fascinating, which is that like all of the books and all of the material is all backward compatible with 5e. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to play just this. It's not an entirely new RPG. You can play it as an entirely new RPG. It's complete. But if you just want monsters, right? Like I look at it and it's like they got the fella from Blog of Holding to do all the monster design for this, and he clearly knows what he's doing. I've been following Blog of Holding for a while. Yeah. And so I'm very interested to be like, oh, well, a whole different take on the 5e monsters that I can use. And if I like their vampire better than I like WOTC's vampire, I have another vampire I can use. And I don't have to use anything else, right? I can just use the vampire. Yeah. They said that classes from LevelUp will be able to play side by side with classes from 5e, right, in the same game. And like that's pretty cool, right? That's an interesting idea. So then it's almost like getting is it like getting another Tasha's? Kinda, right? Like you're getting a whole book of subclasses that can sit on the side and play right next to your 5e stuff. So that's pretty neat. They have new takes on spells. Like my big canary in the coal mine is, I wonder what they did with Hero's Feast, right? Like is Hero's Feast still completely immunity to poison, or did they fix that, right? So, fix it according to my point of view, right?
Sure.
I think it needs fixing. Everyone else seems to think it's perfectly fine. So, so I think it's fascinating from that way. As to why, I don't know how come more people aren't into it. It may be a big commitment. It may be that people aren't getting their full heads around exactly what it is. Maybe they don't want it, right? Maybe they're like, I'm happy with 5e. I do speculate. I've talked about this on other shows before. That like, it's like Immort and Joe. Do not become addicted to water. And it's like, are we addicted to D&D Beyond? right, is D&D Beyond, the tool, so pervasive now that if it's in Beyond, I use it. If it's not in Beyond, I don't. And is that severely limiting the hobby? Because there's so much good material out there that isn't on D&D Beyond that is very useful. Kobold Press and Monty Cook Games and 2C Gaming and Nord and all these other companies. It was a little outfit, I think, called Ghostfire that I think is making some stuff. I'm not so sure. So, all these third-party publishers are putting out tremendous stuff. But has D&D Beyond become this like critical requirement that limits everything else?
Yeah,
I don't know. On the other hand, it's like, well, you look at LevelUp 5e, and then you look at Tenarius, right?
Yeah.
And Tenarius, I don't know how many backers it had, but it was a ton. And they're like, that's a setting book. And like, I backed it because I back everything. But you're still like, that's interesting that many people were interested in a 5e setting book.
Right.
That seemed to be more than an entirely new take on 5e itself. So I don't know. And the short answer to that very long diatribe was, I don't know.
Right. And that's what's fun about the speculation is we don't know. And every little bit of data, you being a completely data-driven
not completely
person. Well, not completely.
I have plenty of emotions.
Oh, sure. But, when you hear something, your first reaction is show me the data, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Or like, I wonder what everyone's thinking, right? Like,
right.
Yeah. There's a lot of us, and my opinion is not the opinion of the 10 million people playing D&D or whatever.
For sure, but it is of some of them, and so that's why every little bit of data that comes out, adds one more voice, if you will, to the conversation and one more data point.
Does this change the conversation over at MCDM? Right, like MCDM, Matt Colville has talked on publicly about his thoughts on designing an RPG. Right. And if he looks at this and goes, wow, like let's say LevelUp gets 6,000 backers and goes, is that going to be enough? Like he's running a company with full-time employees.
Sure.
Is that going to be, if my big thing is putting out a new RPG, but other people already have, and they didn't do as well.
Yeah. And some of that is,
I'm guessing knowing Matt Colville, it doesn't change his calculus at all, but
right.
Yeah.
But if you are in charge of a company where you do have employees, whose livings depend on your decisions, it behooves you, I think, to at least pay a little bit of attention to these things.
Right.
And it is tough. And, there are other factors involved, obviously, right? There's advertising.
Yep.
There's in some instances, there's the design, is the design something that gamers care about?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Or is it just the hype?
Yeah, there's a weird thing with Kickstarter, too, that I haven't figured out, where some Kickstarters are getting like an entire order of magnitude more attention than others. Right. And I'm running my Kickstarter right now, and I've been working with an external group to do marketing for it, so I can kind of see what the impact of sort of a true professional marketing team can do. And it's not a 10x difference, right? It's not a order of magnitude. So there's something else going on that's able to take some products like Tenarius and give them this 10x boost over another. And it may not be content, right? It may not be the content or the design. It could be some other factor that I have yet to be able to pin down.
Yeah.
Looking at this a lot.
Right. And then you look at something like the Avatar Kickstarter, which
that's a little more predictable though, right? Like it's such a huge brand. It's such a huge it's got such a huge name. I'm not surprised by that one as much as I'm surprised by Tenarius.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by it. I guess I'm surprised, being the game designer, I'm like, okay, that's running on a Powered by the Apocalypse engine.
Right. Yeah, it's the most popular Powered by the Apocalypse game ever, perhaps.
Right. But is it?
Maybe.
Will it actually be played by
I've got
even a tenth of the people that bought it?
Oh, that's that's a whole other factor. Does anybody actually use the stuff they buy on Kickstarter? According to my data, no, because I buy everything and I only play D&D. So
according to the data of one
data point,
Kickstarter backer.
I do have like another little like data driven thing, which is when my friend Ben calls me up and talks about it, that means it's really hit mainstream, because my friend Ben's not a D&D guy. He's a board gamer, but he watches it. And every so often he'll call up and be like, I'm thinking of back in this Airbender thing. What do you think of it? And I'm like, wow, when my friend Ben is calling me to talk about a Powered by the Apocalypse game, that means Powered by the Apocalypse has hit a different level. Right. Than anything else. Like he hardly ever does it. It was like this, and it was like, 2 other games.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we could even get into Kickstarter itself as sort of its own special butterfly of people buying it just because it's on Kickstarter. The same book that, if they walked past it in a game store, they would ignore completely, but since it's on Kickstarter, they're buying it. So that's a whole other sort of marketing part of the industry that we could go into, but we've got so much news.
Yeah, let's keep going.
we'll keep going. This little thing called Unearthed Arcana, Travelers of the Multiverse dropped.
Yeah, that's kind of a quiet news item, really, right?
Well,
quiet. Very quiet. Everybody engaged in quiet introspection. That was
that's what it was.
Nobody lost their collective minds about this.
It's like the movie Airplane when they say assume crash position.
Assume crash.
And the whole D&D interwebs just were like throwing themselves over the backs of their chairs. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, but so in case you may have missed it, obviously Wizards of the Coast puts out this Unearthed Arcana article frequently, where they put new rules into the hands of the players to look at. And this one specifically caught people's interest because of what the content was, which were a bunch of races. Those races included the Astral Elf, the Auto Gnome, who is a mechanical gnome, the Gif, the Hadazi, the Plasmoid, and the Thri-Kreen. And for those of us who have been around for a bit, we instantly recognized many, many of those races as something that we've seen before in a little project called Spelljammer.
One correction. Is it GIF or GIF?
I always say GIF, but that's just me.
I'm just trying to see if we can drive another little piece of the internet crazy.
Yes. Choosy mothers choose GIF. And I will probably say it both ways throughout the rest of this talk now that you've got me thinking about it.
It's actually in the Unearthed Arcana. It says that the GIF themselves are fighting over whether it's pronounced GIF or GIF.
Exactly. As it should be. Now that's brilliant design right there.
That's some meta fiction right there.
Hats off to the designer who added that.
Yeah.
So, reactions to this were obviously strong right off the bat in terms of Spelljammer confirmed. Then there was the Thri-Kreens from Dark Sun. So Dark Sun might be coming. After which we had to point out that Thri-Kreen existed long before Dark Sun came out. So overall thoughts.
I mean, cool. I like to just kind of ride these waves, right? Like I'm happy, and I'm kind of just interested to see what people do with this stuff. I'm interested to see what products come out. I'm trying not to get too bent out of shape about, what happens, but I'm interested in it too. And, I probably spend more time reading reactions on Reddit than I do on Twitter these days. And I read a Reddit post today that talked about kind of their angst about this stuff, which was mostly like, they're just not digging the lack of attribute bonuses that are applied to all these new races. And particularly the new thing that like the descriptions of this, and I'm probably butchering this, but essentially the descriptions of creatures can be anywhere in the humanoid range, right? They don't offer a physical description anymore. It's like, well, it's it's kind of whatever you want it to be. And you're like, well, if it's whatever I want it to be, then why is it called a GIF? Why is it like I thought they were hippo people, right? Like, I would assume hippo people have an average weight, right?
Yeah.
So that they kind of get, so there's a lot of like angst about that part of it. There's a lot of the Spelljammer confirmed. Yeah. There's a lot of nitpicking about various mechanical effects or the lack thereof, right? Are these too overpowered? Are they too weak? What does all that mean?
Yeah, it's that's I love to focus on that, but not in an Unearthed Arcana article, because that's why they put them out. their playtests.
Yeah, to test them. Right.
So I'm generally good. I mean, I can get down into the nitty gritty and discuss certain things, like what it does to give a character 2 extra arms,
right,
and how you can then wrap yourself into a knot, trying to make it so that doesn't matter as much as it might, and then it always ends up mattering in some way anyway.
Right. There's always a trick with the Unearthed Arcanas, because in some circumstances you're like, well, I can only complain about what you showed me. So the argument of like, well, this probably, don't be too upset because this is only an Unearthed Arcana. It may not show up in the new book. And you're like, yeah, but I don't know what's going to show up in the new book, but I do know what they said here. And then there's the opposite, which is you might be good with what they put out in Unearthed Arcana, and then they put it out for real, and now you hate it, right? And
right.
I forget, there was some big change. There was some recent change. There was a race that came out in Unearthed Arcana, and then when it was published, everybody was like, "Oh, I was a Warforged," right? So when the Warforged came out, I think the Warforged and Unearthed Arcana had some armor bonus that they ended up not giving to the Warforged that were published in Eberron, and people were kind of got bent about that. And for me, like, I think I've seen it more. So like I know when they did the Twilight, my favorite class that I love to talk about is Twilight Cleric. And I remember like they actually put out the Twilight Cleric, and it was still like a little like, really, you're going to give 10 hit points every turn, every round? Right. Like that's a lot of time. And then but it was a low amount. It was like just like a D6. And then they increased it to like a D6 plus level after publication. And you're like, well, what's the good of doing a playtest if you're going to like increase it by an order of magnitude, not order of magnitude, but significantly increase it and then publish it? And we never even saw it that way.
Yeah.
So it's real hard to figure out what to do with an Unearthed Arcana, other than like you might as well take it on its face value and tell them what you think.
Right. Yeah. I mean that's technically why they're putting it out.
Right. Like,
and
don't play 4D chess with it. Just tell them how you feel. Yeah.
And in some ways the Unearthed Arcana is marketing. Sure. But in some ways it's sort of inviting vitriol before you really need to. Because if people hate Spelljammer and people, want more basipeople stuff, right. Then they're going to just be outraged early. So
a lot of people, in my opinion, Mike Shea's opinion here, a lot of people put too much weight on what Wizards does and as determining how it affects D&D, when the reality is Jeremy Crawford's not coming to your home to take your player's handbook from you.
Sure.
Right? Like the game, they're doing lots of different things in the future. They're trying lots of things. I guarantee you're going to like some of them and you're going to hate other parts of it, right? That's the way it's going to be. But you get to decide what D&D is to you. You get to decide, you're like, are you going to play 0E D&D, right? There's people who play 0E D&D a lot, right? Yeah. And so it's very interesting to see what they're going to go. But sometimes we overweight what they're doing and how it's going to actually affect us.
Right. And the corollary to that is totally discounting anything that's not Wizards produced D&D.
Yeah. Right.
Which, there is definitely third-party stuff out there that's probably not very strong, but there's also third-party stuff out there.
I lost you for a sec, but now you're back.
All right. So cool. So the one thing I wanted to mention about this is the creature type.
Yeah.
Because that does
that has some big effects. Yeah.
Way down into the actual rules, and they admit it, right in the one say, for example, the text of Cure Wounds specifically says that a spell doesn't work on a creature that has the construct type, which is the autognome. It's not humanoid construct, it's just construct. And so to me, that adds a level of complexity to not only rules going forward, but the rules that have already been published.
Yep.
That make the game a little bit more
charm
tricky.
Person, hold person, charm person, all the ones that are humanoid based.
Target.
What does that do? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious. And there's kind of like a freeing, refreshing thing about just being the gazelle in the middle of the herd, that you're like, other people are going to figure this out, right? Other people, I don't have to figure it out. Like, half the internet's going to go ahead and tell them about their mistake because they like doing that. And they might have another thought in mind, right?
Yeah.
So, curious.
Yeah, because, and that makes the autognome interesting, because one of its specific abilities then is to be able to get a mending spell cast upon it, and you can roll a hit die as if you were taking a short rest.
Yeah, that is interesting, right?
So, and it's not bad. It's not good. It just is what it is, and may or may not fit well into your game, your way of playing. So it's just, it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah.
Put in front of playtesters.
Yeah, definitely.
So anything else on that topic of the Unearthed Arcana?
Not for me, I don't think.
Awesome. Well, then let's get right to monsters, because there was an article put out on the Wizards website from Jeremy Crawford, I believe, that talked about the new stat block design for monsters. And me being neck deep in the middle of monsters for Ghostfire, my ears perked up at this. And of course, the first question I got from our customer support folks was, people are asking if the monster book is going to be the new or the old stat block.
So what's the answer, Shawn?
The answer is, we are so far along in this process.
No, I'm not sure that's the wrong answer. Time to start over, man.
Yeah, I need to start right from the beginning. Of these 400 plus monsters.
Well, I have good news for you. Even WOTC isn't following their own guidance when we talk about the Minsc and Boo guide.
Yeah, it's true. So this article's up on the Wizards website. It's called Creature Evolutions, and it does two things. I just wanted to talk about the monster stat block because it also talks about new race design, which they sort of then put into effect in the Unearthed Arcana. So we've already covered part of it, but just to focus on the monster stat block. So the first thing they're doing is changing creature type to always be capitalized. And this is just sort of an editorial thing, because you don't want to say something is giant and then get it confused with actually being a giant. So it's a small editorial thing to most people, but it's a pretty big thing in terms of formatting. If you are, I'm
sure our friend Scott Gray has is super in depth on this. I'm like, okay,
yep. And then monsters do sort of a similar thing to what we just talked about with the races from Unearthed Arcana. Is fewer monsters are now going to get the humanoid type. Because they aren't really humanoids. So a lot of former humanoids are now going to be called monstrosities or fae or some other type, which is fine.
Are they nerfing a whole swath of spells? Right?
Exactly.
And it's funny because I have a player in my Sunday Frostmaiden game who's a ranger that has Charm Person, and every time they come up against any kind of monster, he's like, if he could be churned, he could be a powerful ally. And I'll say, you're not sure that Charm Monster is going to work on this gray ooze. And he's like, I tried Charm Person on the gray ooze. Right. And you're like, no, it doesn't work. So he burns a lot of spells that way.
Yeah. And so
I feel bad. He's going to have less monsters that are affected by it.
Even fewer monsters will now become the thrall of the party, which is probably not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
The another change is alignment. So before, monsters were given a set alignment, even though they were just talking about orcs rather than a specific orc. So now what they're doing is changing the way alignment works. So if you're talking about an individual unique creature, they will have a defined alignment.
Right.
Generic humanoids will have any alignment because the DM can run that monster any way it wants. It can have its own thoughts and fears and moral compass and all that. And then magical creatures that have a strong moral inclination, like angels and demons and devils, will be assigned the typically alignment. So it's typically chaotic evil for demons, say. And the typically is put there, they say, to remind the DM that although these creatures generally have an alignment, it doesn't have to have, an individual creature does not have to have that alignment. And then members of certain organizations will also get that typically. So, a very strong knighthood that has lots of paladins will say typically lawful good. And then creatures like beasts or oozes that are incapable of moral discernment, or people incapable of moral discernment, will lack an alignment and be termed unaligned.
Right.
And I have thoughts, but I wanted to hear yours first.
You wrote in our notes. There was the only part where you wrote like a bunch of high capital letters and 15 question marks. So you have feelings on it, I'm sure. It's another one like no one asked my opinion, but I'm good with it, right? Like I think I was sad about the complete removal of alignment, which they had tried out in I can't remember, it was Frostmaiden, and I think in Van Richten's guide. I think both of those didn't have alignment, and I missed it, right? Like I got that it promoted this sort of other kind of stereotyping, right? Where like, you'd look in the Goblin, and Goblin was, chaotic evil. And you're like, really? Every single one of them, right? Not one of them follows any kind of code. And so I got what the problem was, but I thought that just removing it also took away what could have been a nice, clean 2-word role-playing prompt for a DM, right? So I'm happy they brought it back. I think the idea of what does it say? Typically, that's a lot of the word typically, right? Like, how many times are we going to see the word typically across the new monster manual? Quite a lot, right? And it's like, do we really need it? Because it was already written into the monster manual. Hey, by the way, the alignment is for the typical version of the monster. Yeah. Do we need that other prompting so much? But on the other hand, it's like, well, it's not like they're eating up space from something else. Yeah. I'm okay. And then I'll let you speak to unaligned.
Well, I'm going to go back to what you said, and you said it's a nice, clean role-playing prompt. I disagree with everything there. I don't think it's nice. I don't think it's clean. I don't think it's role-playing, and I don't necessarily think it's a prompt. I think it has so much baggage, and from previous editions. I think the terms themselves are ill-defined and misunderstood by people, and I think they mean different things to different people. And more arguments that I've had over the years, more than almost anything else, has been about alignment. And interesting. And it's fun for the little memes of how you fold your toilet paper is lawful good versus chaotic good, and it's fun, and it's sort of a funny or fun thing to debate, but you don't want something that's fun to debate in acting as a role-playing prompt. And I know why it's there, because it's always been there. And when you get rid of something that's always been there, you're going to get pushback. But I think there's so much better ways to do certain things than just have these 2 words that practically mean nothing because they mean so many different things.
Yeah, I guess one interesting angle on it is even if you have 30 DMs and all 30 DMs think about what neutral evil means differently from one another, that's okay, because there are 30 different DMs with 30 different groups, and whatever it means to them might be meaningful enough. It doesn't have to, it's one thing if like you've got 30 DMs and they all have to agree, but I don't think we have to agree, right? Like you and I, but I also think back to like this great picture from, I don't know which one of the older books had it, but it was about the lower planes, and it showed demons and devils fighting, and it showed this just complete horde of demons coming in on one side and these regimented devils on the other, all set up in a row. And I was like, that's such a perfect example of chaotic versus lawful evil, right? In this picture, right? And I think that kind of thing, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. And when I see the alignment of a creature and it's fitting somewhere in the 9 box grid, I guess it's a 10 box grid, right? Because we have unaligned in there somewhere. Sure. It gives me a very quick prompt and a quick clue about how this creature operates in the world. So yeah, I agree that 30 different DMs may have 30 different opinions, and they can do what they want in their own world. But those 30 different DMs also have 150 different players, sure,
who also have their own ideas.
Yes,
and so when the chaotic good creature does something that's chaotic,
but they don't know.
Not good.
They're not reading the monster manual.
Maybe.
Then they're out. You read the monster manual, you're out.
maybe the DMs maybe the players that you've played with aren't DMs as well.
Mine are all DMs.
So it's just, this is one of those things where I would just love for them to get rid of alignment altogether and just in the monster description.
Well, hooray from my side then. Yeah,
exactly. You win.
Yay.
Another thing they're adding or discussing in this article is tags. So occasionally a creature will have elf or goblinoid or titan or something like that identifies an important detail about the monster. They're going to be introducing new tags, some which will be a reference to the rules, showing fresh ways for creatures to interact with the game system. Some creatures may have a tag that's a spellcasting class, like druid or cleric. And the monsters of the multiverse will include rules that say what such tags mean. And I'm waiting to see this in action.
Yeah, right.
It's adding, you're adding more complication. So even as you try to make a simpler, more streamlined stat block, you're adding things that need to be referenced outside the stat block, which is the whole reason you got rid of the spell list in the first place. So it's like, are you trading, one complication for another?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky to see how it'll also be tricky. It's like, again, how does it play back with all the monsters that you have from the past, right? Like if there's a whole kind of new system around these tags and how things operate with these tags, well, how does that apply to monsters that don't have them?
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Cool. So we have also, they're going to add proficiency bonus to a stat block. That sort of makes sense.
They've been doing that. They've been doing that for a while.
Yeah, they're going to separate out bonus actions into their own sections. So we already have the reaction section and the action section. Now we're going to have the bonus action section, which it makes sense to me. Just make it easier for DMs to figure out their action economy for their creatures. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. That's fine. Anything to make it easier to run.
And then in spellcasting, they are going to. This is the one that got the most.
This is the
attention.
big one. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, it's not necessarily the big one, but for a lot of people, it is. Yeah. Because rather than just having a simple, merely having a spell list, they are going
simple
to
isn't exactly right.
Pull out spells that. My take is they're pulling out spells that get the most attention, that are the most powerful ones that the monster or the creature has, and they're going to make them separate actions all for themselves. And the first and rightful response was, well, what about Counterspell? Because I don't know if Wizards of the Coast is aware of this, but Counterspell is a very powerful and divisive and I don't know, much used spell in a lot of games. So taking that option away from players gets their ire up pretty quickly.
Oh well.
Yeah. And your response, playing the tiny violin. Your response is the same as mine, which is
I hate Counterspell.
Yeah, I don't like Counterspell.
It's like no one
much.
likes it.
Yeah.
Anybody that says like, "Oh, you're taking away Counterspell," great. I'm going to Counterspell you all the time. Do you like that? No, I hate it. Okay, well then, now you know how I feel. Right? Like
it's very powerful, and so if people are saying, well, if the action doesn't necessarily say it's specifically a spell, then will or won't Counterspell work on it, and that became sort of the big rallying cry of the anti. Action,
and like what level does it count as, right? Like some of these are like unique things that are called a spell, but we don't know what level they are.
That's
so how does Counterspell work? Yeah.
Yep.
I have a feeling they're going to address this, right? I have a feeling we're going to see something about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, Counterspell drives me bananas anyway, right? And I can tell you, any player that loves Counterspell, great. I'm going to Counterspell you all the time. How do you feel? Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
All right, now.
So the only spells that will be left in a spell list will be sort of the non-combat spells.
Right, they're utilities,
And any bonus action spells like Misty Step or Shield will be moved into the bonus action. I'm sorry. Yeah. The reaction or the bonus action blocks areas instead.
Yeah, and the other thing, and I think, did I hear you and Teos talk about this before? I can't remember. Is that like there's lots of unique spells now, right? That we saw. I'm seeing this certainly in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. That the creatures, the spellcasting creatures in Wild Beyond the Witchlight, not only are their spells broken out into actions. In many cases, they are unique. We've never seen that spell before, and only they have it, and it only works that way. Even though if you look at it, it's like, well, it's kind of like a fireball, right? It's like a fireball. It's a little bit bigger than a normal fireball, and I think it does necrotic instead of fire, right? And so what does that do when now, knowing fireball doesn't help you anymore?
Yeah.
You got to learn a whole new spell for every monster that you're running.
And I'm okay with that as long as it's in the stat block, as long as it spells it out, because I think that's sort of the fun.
And that's certainly what they've been doing. Yeah.
For me as a player, I want to be surprised. I want weird and funny and cool things to happen, even if I'm or the party's not the one doing it. Mm-hmm. So I want the fireball that goes off, and not only does it do the fire damage, but it pushes me 10 feet and knocks me prone. Which you can do now with that, putting the action in the stat block rather than just as a spell. So I like that it opens up some more design options for monster designers and gets to add some surprises for the players. Yeah. But that's just me. Yep. Any other thoughts on any of that as a whole?
I want to. So my one last thought about Counterspell, since we were on it, which is. All of my non-sensory, all of my jerk reaction to Counterspell. I recall that in the finale of the season 1 of Critical Role, Counterspell had such an emotional impact that it brought the players to tears when a Counterspell was cast because of the emotional impact it had to the story. So the Counterspell can actually have a really big effect in a good way, in an interesting way in a game, even though I'm like, it's lame, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how Counterspell is treated from here on out.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, if you Counterspell a Raise Dead or a Revivify, that's
right. In that case, they had to use a 9th level Counterspell to stop Vecna from teleporting, and that meant they couldn't resurrect a character they had planned to resurrect, and they stayed dead forever, and then they literally sent 2 players into tears.
Yep.
Have you seen the Counterspell that's in LevelUp 5e? Going back
I
to
have
the
not.
LevelUp. They have a version of Counterspell in there. It's got a lot of words in it.
I bet.
The short of is when you are countered, you can then use your reaction to cast another spell, which was an interesting take. So I don't know. Just
what if you then Counterspell that?
I don't know.
Exactly.
Now I got a headache.
Exactly.
I mean, eventually everyone runs out of reactions. That's what happens. Right? There's a limited number of reactions. So.
Right. And until you add the spell that lets you take a second reaction.
Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's as far down the design rabbit hole as we're going to go for that.
Right.
Sort of switching over to the business side of things now. There have been a ton of new job announcements for the D&D Digital team. On Twitter and on other social media, as well as on the Wizards of the Coast website. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was at least 50 new jobs being posted for digital D&D work for Wizards of the Coast. That's a lot of jobs.
That's a lot of new people.
Yeah. And so when you combine that with the announcement of a new version of D&D, when you combine that with the suggestion that some of the supplements and worlds that are coming out are going to be in new and exciting formats.
Well, I think both of those will be true.
Right.
They will be new and they will be exciting.
Yes. So
good is the question.
One can now do a lot of speculating on sort of not only the business side of D&D, but what we consumers of the game have to look forward to. Right. So we can speculate forever. And I mean, this gets into some really interesting topics like, okay, digital D&D. When you think digital D&D right now, what comes to mind? What comes to mind for me is D&D Beyond.
Yeah, Roll20, D&D
and
Beyond.
Roll20 Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah,
all of that.
Yeah.
So, with 50 plus new people, can you do a D&D Beyond?
I don't know.
Can you do a DM's Guild on your own?
One?
Can you do a tabletop, digital tabletop? And how long would that take? And boy, if that's what this new digital team of 50 plus people are going to be working on, what does that mean for a new edition?
Yeah, I don't know. So I have this. I think, is this where we get into two old guys mispredict the future?
Exactly.
Is that the plan?
Yeah.
So make bad predictions. I have one prediction. It's not a prediction, but I have one possible, slice of the universe that I worry about. Like, I think it would be absolutely fine and fantastic for Wizards to pour a lot of energy into making a really cool digital holding. I think they could shatter the marketplace if, in doing so, they either limit their licenses or pull back the licenses they've already granted to D&D Beyond, to Roll20, to Fantasy Grounds, and to other groups that have already had those licenses. Because I can imagine a future where it's like, well, all of the books you currently own on D&D Beyond, they'll still be there, but any of the new books are not going to be there. Right. And because it's called D&D Beyond, they still can't bring third-party publishers in there as well. So now they have this, old and getting older set of books in there that you've already bought and already paid for. But if you want the new books, you're going to have to come over to our system. But if you come to our system and you want the old books, you're going to have to buy those again a third time because you probably already bought the paper copy too. Yeah. And no one's going to put up with that. They if they do that, and if they have the hubris to think that, like, well, we control the brand, so we can control what we control the license, and people will come to us. It's like, no, people will stop playing, or they might, right? Like hence the false prediction. Maybe it works out and works out great, right? Yeah. I think if they were really believed in themselves, they would continue to offer those licenses up to third parties and make their own, and then let us decide which ones we want to use.
Yeah,
it's
see. Funny you mentioned the word hubris, and I think.
Hiring 50 people is hubris.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah, a bit. Yeah. Hubris. I mean, Teos and I have mentioned this many times, but we've both worked in sort of the corporate world, including, like Fortune 100 companies.
Yep.
And hubris and CEOs tend to go hand in hand.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't put anything past anyone thinking that they can do blank and, control the market, quadruple the size of the player base, whatever. And the problem is people have that hubris in the corporate world because they are forced to by shareholders.
Yep.
Right. We need to, we doubled
growth. Right.
We doubled our revenue last year. We should be quadrupling it next year.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And why wouldn't we? Oh, look at all the money that licensees of ours are making. We could be making that money. So, and there's no thought really given to the fallout from that. Just like you're saying, right? Nobody's thinking, are we going to lose players because they've already paid for their books on Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or D&D Beyond? And is the player base large enough that it doesn't matter that we're going to get new players in to replace those old players? So, this is a question that comes up every edition and almost every product of every edition.
I mean, you and I were there. Remember the hubris of 4th edition when it first came out? Right? Yeah. Like, we're going to take all those MMO people and bring them here. We're going to have a virtual tabletop. We're going to have virtual character creation. We're going to have a whole digital presence, all this great stuff. And it's like, man, half of that never even happened.
Yeah. And not only that, the hubris of, the old game sucked.
Yeah, right. I remember, like, I was in the audience at Gen Con when they announced it, and they said, like, and this one, we go to 30th level. And the dude next to me immediately said, this one goes to 11, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was like, immediately the cynicism was like, you guys are wrong.
Right. And you don't have to deal with all the stupid grappling rules. Ha ha.
Yeah.
Of the game that we're actually still publishing right now. So it's super interesting.
There's a lot, I'm sure, like you've seen it too, where there's a lot of I'm really good at this, therefore I must be also really good at these other things. Mm-hmm. And it's like you know nothing about that stuff. So like saying like well, you guys are really good at printing and shipping books around the world. Like they're pretty good about that, right? Yeah. Like I get books at my local game shop. They look really great, right? That doesn't mean you know anything about building an online system. And how many online systems have they tried to build and had go nowhere? You know, I have to stop myself every day from just writing out Gleemax on Twitter all the time.
Yep. For those of you who weren't around in previous editions, many times digital tools have come out. Some okay, and some horrible failures,
or some that were terrible and took 2 years and then became pretty good.
Right. I mean, we've seen the sort of full roll of different successes and failures. And as they always say in sort of the lawyer ads, past circumstances
the past does not determine the future. Yeah.
Future outcomes. So maybe they do now have the income, the attention of Hasbro, and the resources that they can pull this off. You never know until you see the final product, and making a new tabletop, making a new D&D Beyond, making a new DM's Guild will take time.
Yeah, I mean we'll see, and maybe if they're just hiring them now, right. Whatever their new product formats next year, that's not that. I don't think. Like I don't think it can be that.
Yeah.
The other one is I don't know if this is even on our list, but they are announcing a new product tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Right? Did you hear this? Yeah, I saw this. Like comicbook.com posted an article that said that there is a product that showed up on Amazon that says it's going to be announced on the 12th. It's going to be announced tomorrow as their first I guess the first product after Monsters of the Multiverse. And immediately everyone's saying Planescape, and they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure it's Planescape because the UA just came out. I mean, maybe it's Planescape, but who knows? So, but it's not going to be a new virtual tabletop version of D&D because they haven't even hired 50 people yet. So in that case, it's like, well, that's far enough out in the future that we might get hit by an asteroid. So why worry about it?
Right. But it would be in the realm of possibility for that 2024 new version of D&D.
Yeah. But I'm pretty confident they're still going to come out with paper versions of that.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as they keep coming out with paper versions, they can kind of do whatever they want to do with digital as far as I'm concerned. Right. Like,
Wow. Yeah. We've covered a lot of ground, and we're only like halfway through the news that we've put up this week. Did you want to talk about one more thing? Dealer's choice about what news item you want to talk about?
I'm going through our big list here.
Yeah.
We could talk about the Gargantuan Tarrasque. That's a nice closer. Or Minsc and Boo. Either of those would be interesting.
Well, since it's a mini thing, we have to wait for Teos. Because Teos is Super Mini Man. So we're going to talk about the new Baldur's Gate.
I mean, just because of that, I really want to talk about it.
Well, I'm going to plug my ears and go la 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 the whole time. But Minsc and Boo's Journal of Villainy. Yeah. So 150-page supplement. With classic monster stat blocks, high-level villains, and more. Author being James Olin, WOTC employee and the creator of the Baldur's Gate games back in the day.
Yep.
So now he runs the new Archetype Entertainment Studio. So this is sort of a weird thing.
Yeah, he also just to make sure I understand, he's also the one that wrote the Baldur's Gate. The recent Baldur's Gate book that showed up on the DM's Guild. I forget what it was called. And also did Odyssey of the Dragonlords, right?
Yes.
So they have, right.
Yeah. What happens is when you become a Wizard employee, you can't put things up on the DM's Guild. You can't make money off your own products. So the people that have done products,
Heroes of Baldur's Gate, that was called.
People have to donate the earnings to a charity, which is generally Extra Life.
Right.
So that's what happened here. So in that sense, it's not surprising, but it caught people by surprise because it is published by Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
And it's so large.
Yeah, it's
generally
big, right? And it's a print. You can get it in print.
Exactly. So usually these extra life things are, maybe they'll get up to 100 pages, but generally they're a bit smaller, and like maybe an adventure and a couple races and some backgrounds and something like that. This was a hefty tome.
Yeah, it was huge. Yeah.
To come in, and since it is published by Wizards of the Coast, it automatically gets extra attention slash scrutiny. So it became a bigger thing. What's that?
Did it? Oh, it got extra attention and scrutiny in general.
In general, right?
Yeah, I was wondering if it got extra attention and scrutiny in WOTC. That's a question I have.
That is a question that we all have, because it's quite possible that this was something that James was going to do as a follow-up to their original DM's Guild publication before he worked for Wizards of the Coast. And now, since he's sitting on this material and can't really do anything with it, Wizards just said, "Hey, we'll put it up as a charity product."
Right.
And so there it is. It's out there. It's 150 pages of a lot of
stuff, a lot of villains, a lot of factions, a lot of monsters.
Yeah.
The art is great, right? The art is really like it feel like from a, if you were to squint, it feels like a full WOTC product, right? Like it's or a really high end DM's Guild product,
right?
It looks so good. I was like really close to buying the print version. I haven't yet, and I may still if I decide I'm going to use more material from it. I think the one thing that grabbed my attention right away is that the monster design in it is not the new monster design, right?
Correct.
That like when we look at Witchlight monsters, we look at monsters in Van Richten's guide. These are the old way, right? They have the spell casting blocks. They have, I think they do in some cases list the most commonly used sort of combat based spell in the stat block.
Right.
But then my big question is, look, well, how much play testing did these guys go through? How much do I trust these monsters to be well balanced for their expectation? Or do I have to, keep my designer hat on when I'm running them?
Right.
But there's some really great monsters. They have the Farum in here. The Farum is a monster that I've been kind of looking for a while. A lot of sort of old school D&D monsters in here that have not yet been, yet been put in play. A lot of really great villains. Again, a lot of like unique NPCs.
Yep, and four cities, including Baldur's Gate, 10 patron groups, monsters, villains, henchmen, all sorts of things for $15, $14.95 PDF, or $35 softcover, $45 hardcover, all going to charity. And the question you asked, Mike, is a really important one because of the many different avenues for publication. We're seeing stuff published by Wizards that probably, I'm not saying this is the case here, but may not have gone through the same scrutiny as other products. In the meantime, people that actually do work for Wizards of the Coast as freelancers and editors and artists may be putting out books that have gone through the scrutiny that a Wizards book would go through, but are getting discounted because it's not directly published by Wizards. So all of this,
and also there are things that have gone through scrutiny and been directly published by Wizards that are also a complete mess. So it's still like how you really can't hang on to any. At least from my perspective, I look at monster stat blocks. I can't hang on to any of them too tightly. Right. Mordenkainen's has tons of monsters in it that are such a mess. They are rewriting them. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's another sort of fun business thing, but just more content for your game, especially if you're running in the Forgotten Realms and in the Baldur's Gate area, and want those cool monsters like the
I picked it up and I think it's totally worth it. The art is just blows me away. Like they have so many like big pieces of full page art, and as far as I know, they're new. If they're published somewhere, I don't recognize them. And yeah, I look at monsters and I'm already like, yeah, I could run these. Like, I want to give it a little bit of a careful eye to make sure something isn't out of whack. But I think I have to do that with everything these days. Yeah. And I think it's totally worth it.
Awesome. So that was an episode. Mike, thank you so much for coming on to
when do we get to do it again?
Yeah, let's do it again tomorrow.
We should send Teos to Italy all the time.
Teos, please stay in Italy. Well,
no, I want to listen. I was just listening to the one that you just did with Stacy and Will, and it was so outstanding. That was such a great episode.
Yeah, talking with those creative types, especially Will and Stacy, is always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And listeners out there, thank you for listening, because you are the ones that keep us going. So thank you if you're a listener, and thank you especially if you're a patron. If you would like to become a patron of the show, you can go to patreon.com/MMP. Mike, for our listeners out there, where can people find you on social media or follow your work?
Best way is to go to my website, slyflourish.com. I have links to all of my other places there.
And yeah, all the inroads to the Sly Flourish media empire.
Yep, and all that leads to all of the others.
Cool. You can follow me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or if you want to follow Teos, you can follow him at AlphaStream. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Mastering D&D. Mastering Dungeons is a Misdirected Mark production. So, Mr. Mike Sly Flourish Shea, what are we going to do now?
Go kill monsters.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Is that the right answer?
That was the right answer.
Yay!